Jesus.
I think we should just keep.
We
that
only
in.
heard it 1,000 times during the movie.
They said the name of the ship 40 times.
All right, here we go. All right, hello, welcome everyone to Critique Revolve, Rayman Digital's exclusive movie, television, and media podcast. In this episode, we will be discussing Universal's Gothic tale, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. I am Michael Flores, your host, and with me today is Ryan Denton. Go ahead, let it out.
What's up, guys? This is our second intro. Mike messed up the name of the first one, so I couldn't help myself. I'm a child.
Listen, ignorance can get the best of anyone.
It's whatever, dude. It's not that big of a deal. Just the name of the movie.
Yeah. All right. So this movie is based on a single chapter, The Captain's Log, from Bram Stoker's classic 1987 novel Dracula. The story is set aboard the Russian schooner, the Demeter. If I say it right, I'm all
Demeter.
fucked
That's
up.
correct. That's 100% correct.
Completely
I know. It's Demeter. You got it right.
Which was chartered to carry private cargo, I believe 24 unmarked wooden crates from Carpathia to London.
Which is Romania, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
The film details the strange events that befell the doomed crew as they attempt to survive the ocean voyage, stalked each night by the terrifying presence on board the ship when it finally arrives to London, derelict, with no trace of the crew. I think most of us are familiar with that specific story from Dracula. It's a very iconic moment within the original Bram Stoker novel. But I never thought we would get a movie that cuts away all of the beginnings and the end and just tells the center or maybe the quarter into the book and then leave it at that. I would not think that would work, but they actually were able to create a rather interesting take on the Dracula mythos in a way that I didn't expect could be done. Now, the film does have a running time of 118 minutes and is directed by Andrei Overdahl. I did like this movie quite a bit. I thought it was an interesting take on Stoker's Dracula. There have been so many films and television series that have attempted to wade into Stoker's mythos, some with less creative know-how and others that have been pretty damn stellar.
Yeah.
It's kind of hit or miss when it comes to the Dracula, I guess you could say the Dracula canon.
Yep.
The director did separate his version of Dracula from the many other adaptations by not approaching the titular character in the same fashion, meaning there was a concerted effort to dispel the idealized portrayal of Dracula as this cursed nihilist.
Yep.
And romantic, which usually also is something that embodies the character, and instead elects to capture, I guess you can call it or say, he elects to capture Dracula's monstrosity more than anything. Now, the nihilist layers were there, but the creature itself was more or less this force of evil that was nihilism incarnate. And right? Did you get that as well? It was he was less of an individual,
so you know what,
more of a force.
I took it as it was their take on the Salem's Lot style vampire.
Okay.
I really did like this movie quite a bit as well. I liked that they changed it. Dracula is one of those characters that you have in your mind, this Bela Lugosi, good evening. You know, like that is what, when you hear Dracula, Bela Lugosi is the first thing that pops in my head, right? And this, like you said, this romanticized, character who can seduce women with the way he looks, or anybody with the way he looks at them, or he's got this like kind of suave, debonair to him, and that's because he is Dracula, right?
He is an animal of sorts that has an animalistic allure to him that ensnares his victims.
And they went complete 180 direction with this. They showed the monster that is Dracula, and really the horrific nature of the character being, a vampire, right?
Completely stripped of any notes of humanity.
Yep. And I think it was a good take, because there were a few scenes, which obviously we'll talk about, but there were a few scenes where it glimpsed into the humanity of the character, but it was more like the character was learning and not so much just he was a fucking monster.
Yeah. And I do think that worked because we've all seen so many Dracula films up to this point.
So many.
And we're used to that typical suave, seductive type of villain.
Yep.
Whereas here you just have a monster.
A killing machine.
A monster, yeah. And it did work to kind of sow the seeds of the horrific and instill fear in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how Dracula fans will react to this take. I mean, you are a big Dracula guy.
Yeah, my dad, the Universal monsters were something that I was shown as a kid. You know, Frankenstein, the Mummy. These were things that my dad grew up like loving, right? I mean, like, so these were things that I enjoyed this take. I thought it was, it showed a side of Dracula that we rarely ever see. I think the only movie that was the one with Luke Evans.
Yeah.
I think I forget what that's. It's
Dracula, the Untold Story,
yes,
something like
which
that.
Which is one where we sort of saw that same side.
Yeah. But there is also the humanity there that's needed to create like empathy for the character.
So they definitely, for this character, they went a complete 180 direction and just basically made it pure evil.
Yeah, because you typically kind of like Dracula.
He's kind of a cool character, dude.
Isn't that the interesting contradiction or the paradoxical aspect that fills the viewer when he's watching this? Because you kind of like him, but you also know he's not a good guy. Here, you don't have any of that. You just don't like him because he's scary as fuck.
I feel like most vampire movies and Dracula movies, they make a very discerning effort of making you question whether you would want to be a vampire or not. Like for me, dude, if someone said, hey, look, Ryan, you can stay looking young for forever. You can only come out at night. Song? Yes, exactly. You can only come out at night and you feed off human beings. I'd be like, well, cool, sign me up. None of that sounds like a downside, you know?
Well, it depends on what vampire mythos is.
Right, but if I had to look like a
fictional world, because if it's the underworld mythos, then
I get to fuck Kate Beckinsale all the time. Are you kidding me, dude? Like, sign me up for that.
That's a default. Oh, you're a vampire in this world?
Oh, Kate Beckinsale.
Here's your lady.
I think, dude, like, first of all, Selena, if I got to be with that.
You even know the character's
yeah, I know the character's name. She's fucking banging hot in those movies. So, like, if it were that type of vampire.
There's no question.
No question.
Yeah.
But to be an absolute killing machine, disgusting monster like in this movie, no shot. I'd be like, nope. I'm just gonna go ahead and let the sun come up and burn me to death, dude, because I'm not doing that. No fucking way.
Yeah, I'm there with you. So what were your overall initial thoughts on the film? I know you pretty much skimmed through them, but let's get into some more details.
I was actually when you asked me to do this movie, I was quite excited to see this because I had seen a preview for it. And I looked up exactly what it was about, and I was like, ooh, this is cool. Again, I was kind of on the same, take of, how are they going to do a movie about that segment? It was only one chapter of a book. Like, how are you going to, of course you have a little bit of looseness there. You can kind of add some stuff to it because, you're not held down by 5 chapters of a book, right? Like, it's just one chapter of the captain's log. And if you know anything about captain's logs and anything like that, it's very vague. Anyways, they don't put every detail in there. But I was very intrigued, especially, when we started watching the movie. I was very intrigued at the take of Dracula. I think that was something that really stood out to me. I enjoyed some of the disturbing images of horror as far as focusing on this person here, but in the background you see something move, right? And they used a lot of shadowing and things like that were really proper horror shots. Mm-hmm. I feel like you said, I feel like Dracula's a very romanticized character, so the horror element may go away sometimes, I feel like, even though it is technically a horror character. Mm-hmm. And this movie didn't do that. I don't think they did a good job of creating suspense, using shadows, using shots that were really horror-esque, right?
It's funny because when we talk of Universal's monsters, we think of monsters, but oftentimes Dracula isn't really a monster movie at times
Right.
by its traditional definition. However, this is a true monster
movie.
film. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that really was interesting is that they gave us a full view of the monster pretty early. I think they, normally.
Well, early, I guess in some context.
Early in where you would expect it to be, right?
Yeah.
Because I would have expected them to do more of the, tease. Here's a kind of a shot of the character, and then, that full reveal at the end, like here I am moment, right?
Yeah.
And
but don't you think that would have
it
made the movie a little better though? Meaning, imagine because so and we are going to get into spoilers here, everyone.
Right? Of course. Yeah.
So the thing that I felt was a bit disappointing when it comes to this movie is that we never saw Dracula in his human form.
Right. And I was a little disappointed in that too as
and
well.
I thought it would be more like a cosmic horror type of thing, like John Carpenter-esque, The Thing, where you're trying to figure out who is Dracula. Because we know Dracula can take on various
Human forms, yeah.
And when they had, it felt at some point in the movie they were going in that direction. When they
Right.
said someone on this crew killed the livestock, I was like, oh shit, they're gonna do one of these things.
They're going
like,
to do a 180 where one of the persons on the ship is.
yes,
Yeah,
and
I
it's
thought
like
that too.
and it's a bit of a mystery.
Which
so
I love
started,
about The Thing. Yeah.
Isn't that one of the greatest
It's one of the
moments
greatest
in horror films?
It's one of the greatest movies ever.
Yeah,
I
it
think that
really
might be in my
is.
top 10.
Absolutely,
It's
absolutely,
so
is.
good, dude.
Yeah, so that's what I was hoping they
Yeah.
would do
I see, yeah.
because when I started feeling that was what they were going to go with or go in that direction, I started to pay more attention to which character has never been seen in the sun.
Right.
And which character tends to live within the shadows
God, that
of the
would've
boat
been
itself.
So cool.
And that's why I was leaning towards it being the cook for a while.
Yeah, that would have made so much sense.
Which it would have been like really cool irony for him to
Gut-wrenching.
be
Yeah.
the villain. That's where I felt ultimately the movie failed because it fell into it was trying to be different,
Yeah.
but then also it was very straightforward.
Yeah, I think the straightforwardness did work. It didn't take me out of it. I think the thing that I was really disappointed with was just so much the pacing of the movie. And what I mean by that is I felt like when we really got to 0 to 100 and things were like, oh fuck, it was like, okay, there's 10 minutes left in the movie. And I felt like it didn't build quick enough. I think the suspense, the monster murdering guys, it's a monster movie. He's going to murder people, right? So spoiler alert. But the monster murdering people, I felt like there weren't that many crew members where they kind of held off on killing some and kind of gave you a swerve.
The
and
death count was too low.
yeah, I hate to say that, but maybe at some point,
I
yeah.
agree with you. And you and I are both not gore mongers.
No, I don't
we
care about that.
Yeah, we're not those type of horror fans where we need the gore.
I don't need it. I think this movie would have done a little better with 2 or 3 more like mysterious murders.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, and I hate to say that because it sounds so cliche, but it really is. Yeah. I think the pacing just didn't, by the time it built, it was like, okay, there's 15 minutes left. And I was like, well, okay, well,
They were drawing things out that I don't know if they needed to be drawn out.
Yeah, that's kinda how I felt
most
about it.
people understand the Dracula mythos. So
Right.
they're trying to build the suspense and never quite. They were acting as if no one knows who Dracula is.
Yeah, exactly.
So they were dragging it out, and you can even say, "Well, this movie was designed for a younger audience. People that may not be
I
familiar
don't
with
know about
Dracula."
that, dude.
But who isn't familiar with Dracula in some way? We know.
If this is for the younger audience, and there's 2 things that happen in this movie.
Well, there was a baby in the audience.
There was. God, can we like?
What the fuck's wrong
Dude,
with
there
people?
was like this movie's rated R, guys. Okay, and there was a kid that had to have been 7 or 8. Now that's all relative. Okay, I went and saw Terminator 2. Would that come out? 94?
92.
92. I was 7. I went and saw that in the theater. So, but there's only a couple disturbing parts in that movie This movie, dude, there's no way I would take a 7-year-old to go see this movie.
Well, halfway through the movie, I'm like, okay, this movie is
not bad.
Adequately creepy. There are scary moments, but I can probably let my kids see this. And then suddenly someone bursts into flame. Literally right when I was thinking that, I'm like, okay, never mind.
Yep.
Because that was some of the most disturbing imagery I've seen in a mainstream horror film in quite some time.
I think that, like, and the thing is...
Not because it was grotesque.
It just was shocking.
It was shocking.
I think, like, I've seen enough vampire movies to see a vampire burst into flames. I mean, fuck. One of my favorite scenes is the beginning of Blade when he's fucking chopping up vampires and they're...
Oh, that's the best.
That fucking first scene is amazing. But...
That's on top 10, too.
Oh, absolutely. That scene. Top
just that scene.
Just that scene. The rest of the movie's but that scene, or I got his fucking pig sticker. Anyways, the thing that threw me away was that it was very disturbing the way they did it.
Yeah.
And the way that it just kind of happened. And it wasn't so much like you didn't see it coming until it was like, oh God. Like, and there were two things, and I don't want to talk about now because we're not in spoilers, but the two things that happened in this movie that absolutely shocked the fuck out of me. That are almost a no-no. I don't want to use the word no-no because but it is a unwritten thing that you just don't do in movies. And you know what I'm talking about when I bring it up. But they did these two things, and I was sitting there like, holy fuck! Like, I did not expect that to happen. Like,
yeah, they subverted our expectations
a lot,
very well.
I think
that I will give them credit for that because, like I said, we're going to talk spoilers, so you can say what it was. It was the dog, and a kid, the two things
that you just don't
typically don't kill in movies, and the dog was the first one to go.
Yeah, and you're like, huh! Like,
I looked at you and said, wait a second. Did that really just happen?
Yeah, I was like, no way. Like, there's no way that the kid or the dog. No, both. And the kid, the way the kid went was like...
It's one of the most brutal ways.
Yes, just like, okay, didn't expect that to happen. And
so does this director hate dogs and kids?
Yes, hates them, dude. He's like, he hates them as much as I hate old people, apparently. You know what, dude? Like, that really, really did... throw me off. I think the other thing that was incredibly good in this movie was the acting. I think this cast, I mean, I knew the guy that played the captain because I think he was in Game of Thrones and a couple other things.
Yeah. He's
very fantastic actor. Of course, I don't know his name because I'm a terrible person and terrible reviewer, but fantastic actor. The main character was really, really good. And to be completely honest, dude, the kid was phenomenal. But the whole cast did such a great job of
helping create the mood, and that's where certain things, just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying a few moments ago, when it comes to what really didn't work for me, I think where the film doesn't quite work comes from somewhere beyond its moody atmosphere, meaning outside of the dread that it created, which it did, and it was great. The movie doesn't seem to have much more to offer outside the potential dread and panic of a creature of unknown evil residing on a boat full of crew. It wants to be more than just a standard Dracula film and be something more horrific, but it doesn't fully commit at times.
Yeah.
There are times, as you mentioned, for example, when the people that Dracula bites burst into flames. So there are those moments, and that's why I feel a little conflicted in saying that it doesn't fully commit, because there are two very obvious moments that where the director does absolutely commit. But outside of that, it goes right back to what you were saying about the pacing.
The pacing just felt weird.
The movie was directed fine, it was written fine, but the way it was written, I don't know if... So on paper, it works.
Yeah. But
as a Dracula film and dealing with the expectations that many audiences come into, based on the expectations that many of us carry with us into movies like this.
Yeah.
They're not going to be met. And I'm not one of those people that say all of our expectations must be met, because we all know that the thing that I hate the most is fan expectation, because it ruins so much for everyone.
You can't go in with an open mind.
Yes. However, there are certain things you have to adhere to. And I do think that this film will resonate with horror enthusiasts, as well as certain Dracula fans. It is, as we have been saying, much different than the more modern takes of Dracula, but that doesn't mean it's not an authentic adaptation. I do believe it's authentic. Typically, the filmic conventions that govern a Dracula film contains elements of realism and social commentary, which were often used to reflect concerns and anxiety of the Victorian era when the book was written. And in more modern times, the same can be said. And when it comes to this movie, there is that social commentary. It's subtle, like movies should do with social commentary, and it does a great job displacing the typical social commentary for demographical and geographical purposes. So it does have things that definitely work in its favor, but it's going to be interesting to see after this weekend how fans react to the movie, because honestly, I'm not quite sure.
I think
again, because I felt the same way with Oppenheimer. If you remember, I'm like, I'm not sure if Nolan fans are going to love this, and I was completely wrong because they did.
I think that this is going to be one of those ones where some fans are not going to like it because, as Dracula fans, you romanticize this character of Dracula, and your headcanon is, that's fucking Dracula, right? I think people are going to be. I think that horror fans will like it. I think there were horror aspects of this movie, but I would not consider this a full-blown horror movie. And the reason I say that,
I would agree,
is that it's more of a thriller.
Doesn't it feel more like it's in the same arena as Blade?
Yeah.
And
it's like Predator. Predator's not a horror movie.
We just mentioned with Kate Beckinsale.
Yeah, Underworld.
It feels more supernatural.
Yes. And the reason being, and I'll say this, and again, and I go back to the gore, the killing and the gore, the body count was just a butt hair too low for it to be considered a horror movie. I hate to say it that way, but it's true. I think that
Halloween, likes to boast as being one of the greatest horror films of all time.
Right, but that was scary.
That's true.
So I feel like there were no times in this movie where I got jump scared at all. Right,
except the flame scene.
The flame scene was like, whoa! Like it was more caught me off guard than it did scare the shit out of me.
Yeah,
like
it was unsettling.
It was unsettling. Like with certain horror movies, like I'm scared. I'm physically I don't want to watch this. Like I get that weird feeling, right? Which is that's the whole point. You go to a fucking haunted house,
like with Hereditary.
I still have not seen that because you told me not to watch it.
My butthole was sweating,
dude. I like being scared. Don't get me wrong. I go to Halloween Horror Nights. I go to haunted houses. I want to be scared. There is a reason for that. But at the same time, when I go to a movie that's a horror movie, I want to. That should happen.
You
want to
experience that a bit more,
right? I think there are some unsettling shots. There's a scene where the main character is looking into a shadow, and you could see the back of Dracula standing there, and it's so obscure, but in your brain's telling you that it is him. It's a cool shot.
Yeah,
it's a very cool shot, but it's there's some unsettling shots, but I wouldn't consider them horror shots. If that makes sense.
It's interesting you say that, because that is where the movie works, or did work the most for me, is in its filmic endeavors. As a filmmaker, the director did an amazing job bringing out things that really made the film was gorgeous.
Yeah, it was absolutely beautiful looking film,
gorgeous. In fact, my favorite part of the movie, or favorite parts, had to do with the setting and the locations. When you're dealing with Gothic fiction, there are certain things that must be implemented. Dark hallways within haunted mansions, the dark, dreary, abandoned castles, colossal-sized churches.
Dude, the weather,
and the production designer, along with the director, did a really great job turning a boat into the proper setting.
Yeah.
That was the highlight for me, how they turned this boat into a Gothic location. It was fantastically executed. There's even a scene at the end of the movie where the boat has run aground in London, off the London shore, right? Off the British shores. And the way they capture this looming presence of a boat in the background, it looks like a castle.
Yep.
It's perfectly done. So from an artistic perspective, the movie is nearly flawless. But from a writing perspective, through I guess you can say a craft element, there is something missing.
I would agree with you on that.
It needed something a bit more to add more oomph to it, because you get the idea that they're trying to build a mythos, and I don't know if that's a good thing anymore. I'm wondering if movies should quit trying to occupy themselves with fleshing out a long-lasting IP.
Yeah.
As opposed to just working on a single film, and if that movie does well, then you can expand on it.
Yep.
Look at one of the films that launched IPs, really, which is Star Wars.
Yeah.
Star Wars: A New Hope was, from beginning to end, a complete film.
Yeah, you don't need to watch anything else. You could literally watch Star Wars: A New Hope and be like, oh, okay.
Exactly, and because of its success, it was able to be expanded upon.
Same thing with Predator.
Same thing with Predator.
It's a great standalone movie, but then they created a whole universe for it.
Yes. With this movie, it does feel like they were adding layers that would be something down the road.
Yeah.
For example, the main character, Clemens, is obviously Van Helsing.
Without being called Van Helsing.
And I'm sure if they make a sequel, which I don't know if they will, but if they do, that's probably the name he's going to assume, or you're going to find out that that's his real name.
Right.
Because it's very subtle at the beginning. He's introduced as a doctor, but then you realize he's a man of science, he's highly educated, which is what Van Helsing was more or less
he's not Hugh Jackman
characterized.
From that movie, guys.
Correct.
Yeah,
he was more or less characterized like that in the literature form, as opposed to the classic movie form that we've seen the evolution of this Van Helsing becoming more of a monster hunter.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, but
Kate
at the
Beckinsale's
same
in that
time,
movie too.
That's right. Look at you. Do you know her entire
dude
filmography? Go ahead.
I don't. Go ahead, he says, like I know. Underworld 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry.
That's it.
No.
What about that Adam Sandler movie where she was married to him? Yeah, right. But
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, in today's day and age, yes, we just talked about that.
That's true.
I agree with you. I think it felt like they were throwing things, especially at the end of the movie. They were throwing things together that, like, okay, well, we have an opportunity to do another movie here, possibly, and I think. I understand that from a film and a studio standpoint that they want to obviously.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I get it. I totally understand it.
Yeah. But it doesn't work in their favor.
No, and
times.
I feel like any of the movies that organically got a crazy universe or a couple different movies, they did a fantastic job.
Happy accidents.
Yeah, like the first Terminator.
Yeah.
The first Terminator is I mean, it does definitely shows its age, right? But that movie spawned quite possibly one of the greatest movies of all time.
Yeah. And a giant franchise.
Yeah. So I think that it's okay to do that, but it should be I think it was a little less subtle than it should have been.
I don't know if it weighed down the movie.
No, I don't think it weighed it down.
But I do get exasperated with the teasing of potential of
sequels.
Of these potential sequels that we never get to because studios never fully commit to a movie anymore, or a franchise, or an IP,
or if it doesn't
hit the dollar amount that they want, or if it bombs. You're right. Now, you had mentioned the cast. I agree, was quite good. It's one of the strengths of the film. There wasn't a single loser in the bunch.
No, they were all great. I think everyone was good.
There was a moment that I really liked in this movie when one of the rough and tough crewmen were talking. It came in the aftermath of the dog being killed by Dracula, and they were trying to figure out what happened. Did the dog kill the livestock, or was the dog also a victim of whatever is prowling the bottom levels of the boat? And when the big crewman is all like, no, it wasn't the dog. He's a good dog. I was like, that's a great. It just shows you the love that people have for dogs.
Animals. Yeah.
Because there's other people.
He's a good dog.
He's a good dog. Like, how dare you?
How dare you mention that? Yeah. That's such a normal way for someone to act around a dog. Anyways,
that's why I laughed. Like, because that would be
so accurate.
That's exactly how probably most of us on this network would react to a statement.
No way that dog. It's a good dog. Okay. Yeah, totally right.
Yeah. So the acting was good. There was plenty of moments that everyone had a moment. Everyone had a moment to shine.
Yeah.
There wasn't a single character that fell to the wayside. Of course, there's the ones that die early on and you don't get enough from them, but ultimately every character played their part exactly how they needed to play the role.
I totally agree.
What was your favorite standout moment?
Honestly, so the one that really kind of got me was the kill that he ripped the dude's throat out and then was slowly crawling towards him on the ground. And the guy's trying to crawl away and get the knife, and I got a little bit of a sense of dread in that.
He's a little creepy. Yeah.
It was super creepy. I think the standout moment is, I think, towards the end when you finally get the full, he spreads his wings, there's the lightning behind him and the rain, and the main character finally sees, Dracula in his full glory, was such a great shot. And I mentioned the weather earlier, and I want to talk on this because on a boat that's on the water for 3 weeks or whatever, it's I think it was 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. The use of the weather and the waves and the fog and everything to create dread and suspense and this kind of feeling of, oh shit, just by using the weather.
Yeah.
Was fucking awesome. Some of the shots in like thunderstorms and like the thunder going off and lighting up. And of course they did the traditional, the thunder goes off and then the lightning hits and then you see this face and then it disappears when it was very, very well done. And I think any use of that was really something that I enjoyed.
I agree, especially because when you think of the metaphor that it stood for, because you have these scenes at the beginning of the movie where the actors are talking about, or I should say the characters are talking about the fact that they were alluding to ideas of existentialism, that there is no point, everything is meaningless, and that goes right in line with the whole entire idea of existentialism, which also encompasses areas of nihilism and absurdism, which is this idea that we're not important,
we're not in control,
we are thrown into a chaotic universe with nothing to really take care of us. We are just afloat. And when you bring up the aspect of the ocean, that's what creates that or adds to that theme, that idea.
Yep.
So I'm right there with you. It was great.
It was very well done, and that was something I really liked. I would say the scene, obviously, where he's crawling after the guy, and I honestly think the other one, when there's the hole in the door, and they three air quotes main characters see him standing there. And like that kind of like half.
Why does he have to look at people sideways?
So I think that's the thing.
That is scary.
It's scary because if you know anything about animals, okay, and the way they show aggression, they get bigger. They make themselves look bigger. Why do you think cats do that goofy side? So it makes them look bigger, right? Yeah. Dogs do the same thing. So he's doing this move where he stands sideways and looks less harmful. But when you look at his eyes and they're glowing, you're like, holy fuck. And that's why that scene at the end where he full spreads out his wings is so disturbing, because every time we've seen him isn't like that. It's this small character that looks frail to draw you in. It's a predator. It's a predator move. Yeah. It's a I'm hunting you, you're not hunting me.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so disturbing. That's why, the Slender Man and all those things that look small and tiny or thin are scary, because they're drawing you in as a predator.
I'd also say that the first time we got to see him, which was that moment you're talking about, the way they introduce him from the side also plays against our expectations as people who are very much aware of Dracula and how he should look and how he looks at times. He doesn't always look like this demon form or this demonic figure.
Yeah.
So to have him standing fully upright at that moment inside the cabin where he was attacking the kid, and he just looks to the side, you're not quite sure if he is in human form or if he's in his demonic form. So it plays in the entire Bela Lugosi aspect of the uncanny, because that's what created the fear in the original 40s Dracula, was the use of lighting and his facial expressions. The actor used his facial expressions to create this uncanny aesthetic that he didn't quite look human. He had this odd smile.
Was that an actual person playing that, or was that CG?
That's what we were going to get into next. There were parts that are CG and there were parts that were practical. Most of it, based on what I found online, is visual effects.
Okay.
And you know what? I also think that might be a negative. And I'm not one of those practical babies where everything needs to be done practically.
Yeah.
But the visual effects and special effects were stellar. So I do want to make that clear.
Yeah, they were very good.
They were good. During the opening half, the film feels surprisingly old-fashioned because of its reliance on sheer visuals, suggestive horror, and like a type of hidden malice that was creating dread. And more importantly, invisible VFX. But when the monster is revealed fully, that's where it feels a bit contradictory, because you have this modern aesthetic now that takes over and it plays against the old fashioned. So you have this idea of modernity just because of visual effects infecting the old world. And I don't know if that was a good choice.
I agree. I think that it's something that subconsciously, as a person that goes and sees a movie, if you're going to watch a period piece, okay, something that's set in the 1800s, and then you see a bunch of CG, you're gonna be like, like that. Just it doesn't mesh.
Look at Jonah Hex.
Right.
It's a Western that was completely visual effects.
Makes no sense. So like in your brain tells you, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why would there be? It's set in old times. Why are there visual effects? Right. So I would say yes. I think the visual effects of the monster were fantastic, and I didn't really take me out of it. I do see where you're going with that.
It's a bit of a clash.
Yeah, it does clash a little bit when you get the old timey. I mean, this is set in 1897, so like, this is pre everything, and so it's a little. It can clash a little bit. I don't think it messed me up any. But I do see where you're going with that. And that is something that I look at. I mean, like if obviously if I'm watching like a fantasy movie, Lord of the Rings, like, okay, I would expect to see some sort of it's sci-fi. Like I'm gonna expect to see, even though, you have two hobbits taking a ring to Mordor, there's going to be massive eagles. Like it doesn't, like that sort of thing doesn't take it away from me.
That's more the fantastical.
Right. This is kind of, they tried to set the first half of the movie grounded as like a horror, like
grounded. That's the word I was looking for.
It was trying to be grounded, and then it was like full monster reveal. Okay, here, now we're going to show you,
It doesn't ruin the movie, but
no, but I understand what
it does play against the awesome aesthetic that they built during the opening of the film. So the critical reception hasn't been great already.
It's laughable, and it kind of makes me angry.
It does. I don't know. This seems to be a very common discussion now on all of our reviews.
Yeah.
I don't understand what people want.
What do you want out of this movie? It's a movie about a vampire on a ship.
So it's coming in at 41%.
That makes no fucking sense
on Rotten Tomatoes. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't compute. Like we have problems with this movie. It's not perfect.
Yeah,
but it is not
it's entertaining.
41%.
No,
I mean at all. In fact, you know what? Let me just say my final thoughts
and
then get into my actual score. So the deal with this movie, it's got a very serious, moody vibe going on. You can practically feel the dread creeping in. But the catch is, beyond all that eerie atmosphere and spine-tingling stuff, the film kind of falls a bit flat. It's like they cooked up this big pot of suspense and fear and centered around this creepy unknown evil hanging out on a boat with a whole bunch of crew members. It's trying to be more than your run-of-the-mill Dracula flick, right? We said as much. It's aiming to dial up the horror meter and give you some serious nightmare material, but here's where it gets a bit dicey. It's not totally committing to the cause.
Yeah.
It wavers on the commitment scale every now and then. So while you've got this cool setup, it's like the film is holding back when it should be going all in. So in a nutshell, it's got the moody vibes nailed down and it knows how to make you squirm, but it's got a bit of an identity crisis. It wants to be the next level horror experience, but it's hesitating just when it should be lunging at you with a full-on terrifying gusto. I'm giving it a 79%.
Yeah, I think I can piggyback on just about everything you said. I think it feels like the pacing and the commitment to making it a full-blown horror movie is kind of, I don't want to use the word half-assed, but it's almost seemed like it's half-assed. It seems like the movie wants to go there. It wants to give you that dark, scary Dracula, take, and it kind of starts doing that and then gets watered down. Yeah. And I think, but as a movie, it is incredibly entertaining. There were some scenes
well made.
The shots, the actors, everything is very, very good. And this is worth going and seeing it in the theater. No doubt about it. This is not like, this is one that I think would be totally cool to see in the theater.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I don't think you'll be disappointed. I definitely am not disappointed. I was going to give it a 78%. So we're pretty accurate to each other. I was between a 77, 78. And I enjoyed the movie. I think, I don't know what, but I don't know what the fuck these people want in a movie. This is a good sit down, enjoy the movie. It's a horror / thriller with a good cast, and 43% is ridiculous. I'm sorry, but like, I think I'm so disassociated with the reviewers and what they're seeing and what I'm seeing, or they're just so pretentious that they just go into these movies and hate everything nowadays because it's not some fucking thing that's been shoved down your throat 42 times. You know, some shitty fucking Marvel movie. No offense, but
the mob hasn't told them they should like this movie.
Yeah, it's like as soon as the mob on X now, because we can't call it Twitter now, X says, "Oh, this movie's great," then it's gonna the ratings will start shooting up. I just this movie is something that if you're gonna if you're a fan of vampires, Dracula, horror, suspense, you're gonna enjoy this movie.
Maybe if it said patriarch or patriarchal about 100 more times, maybe it would have earned a 98%.
Yeah, like
maybe if it was less of a movie and more of a manifesto, perhaps it would be up to like
there's
90.
Plenty of mass murder manifestos they could read that they could have just based the movie off of. I mean, they're everywhere now, so
do you want to hear what some of these critics are saying?
Yeah, please. It's gonna piss me off, but go ahead.
There's just nothing about this interpretation of the character that makes him stand out as Count Dracula versus just another standard vampire.
Dude, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. The whole point of this movie. This is pissing me off.
Her review bypasses the point of the movie.
The whole point of this movie is to show Dracula in this is okay. This is my headcanon. This is where I went with this. I'm going to explain this to you. This form of Dracula and what you see in the movie, in my headcanon, was this Dracula has not fed. He has devolved into his
We have
monster.
seen this version of Dracula.
Yes.
In larger movies where we don't just see this version.
Right.
So it is true to who he is.
Right. So I assumed that this is a Dracula that has not fed. He has devolved, and that's why he wanted to eat so badly.
He's rationing himself.
So he's not that, charismatic looking Bela Lugosi motherfucker. He's this gross, nasty monster. And the whole point of this movie is to show Dracula in a different light. Of course, it's not that person's an idiot. Next, give me another one. Give me another one to rip apart. Because it makes me angry, dude.
So the film suggests a gene splice of a slasher flick and supernatural horror, but as enticing as that combination may sound, the director's rendering of it is as bland and listless as the blues and grays that dominate the film's color palette.
Blues and grays. I mean, it's on a ship. Did you want green? They're on a ship in the middle of the ocean.
I don't agree with.
No, these are.
That. I can't disagree with the first critic I read, but the only reason why I agree with it is because she's right, but she's missing the point of the entire movie. This one I don't get. So here's the third one. I admire the ambition. Okay, that sounds like us.
Okay.
Yet I was unable to enjoy the ride for what it was, too caught up in where it might have gone. Well, that's your own expectation.
Yeah, that's an expectation.
That's you wanting to write your own movie. That's not you evaluating the movie based on what was given to us.
Dude, these are
That's the stupidest review I've ever heard.
These are so pretentious, dude.
So here's a positive.
Okay.
What will be this summer's ideal passive thrill, the type of film you go to see on a lazy afternoon that is just fine and a little fun? Look no further than The Last Voyage of the Demeter.
That's a great way to describe it. That person has their head on right.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Bram Stoker wrote Dracula 126 years ago. Somehow Hollywood is still screwing it up. Really? I don't think Dracula's been screwed up too many times.
No.
There has been less than stellar adaptations, but
Yeah.
I don't think there's a habit of Hollywood fucking up Dracula.
No.
I mean, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula take is fucking fantastic.
That movie's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, from a sheer artistic perspective, it's near perfect. The only thing that pulls that movie down, sad to say, is Keanu Reeves.
He's not very
That's
good.
before he
That's
found a good manager and an agent that
Yeah.
found roles that would work for his skill set.
He struggled in that one for sure.
It's bad.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
It's bad. It's the only. In fact, I would probably give Coppola's movie 100% on an RMD score, but instead I'll probably give it like a 70 only because of Keanu Reeves. Dude, his performance is awful in that movie.
Yeah,
it's really bad.
Pretty bad, dude. You know what, man? This bums me out because people are going to see that review. They're not going to go see this movie.
Yeah.
And that's what bums me out because this movie, I know plenty of people that probably won't go see this movie that would really enjoy this movie because of what it is. And they won't go see it because of the shitty score.
And that's what I want to stress before we close out. The movie is well worth checking out.
Totally.
In the theater, if you have disposable income, by all means, definitely go to the theater. I would highly suggest that you do. It has great visuals. It has a fair amount of scares throughout. It's a fun movie to go see. It's not perfect, but it's fun. If you don't feel the imperative or the urgency to see it in the theater, then definitely see it when it comes to Blu-ray or
Yes.
or video
Whatever,
on demand, streaming,
yeah.
whatever window you choose to view the film through. All right. Well, this brings us to the end of our discussion. I want to thank everyone for listening. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.